What's up, everyone? You're listening to the Grepcast from TSP LLC, bringing you a weekly look into the world of technology and technology-adjacent ephemera. My name is Adam Fisk, and today we are joined by Kelly Ford.
Hello.
And Michael O.
Hello again.
Okay, so we are diving back into the world of privacy and overzealous data collection. I know it's very early in the morning for topics like this, but it's becoming more and more frequent, so I guess it's just becoming easier and easier to swallow.
24-hour topic. Doesn't matter what time of day.
Or to ignore.
That's
right?
True. So this is a piece coming from 1.0 written by Susie Cagle. The headline of this one is, "This ID Scanner's company is collecting sensitive data on millions of bargoers." This is outlining a system, a service, kind of all-in-one called Patron Scan, which is tying for one of the creepiest systems of just tracking and identifying data out there.
Well, I think it's really fascinating because, I mean, we've all been to bars where they have the little UV scanners, right? So the idea that your ID gets put into a thing that sort of validates it is something that we're all generally used to. But these guys have taken, as is always the case with technology, said, okay, well, what if we actually scanned the ID? And then what if we shared that ID with a common cloud-based platform amongst all of the bars, all of the places that are doing this, so that we can reduce, fake IDs, we can reduce troublesome, people that are going to go in and blow up the bar, from doing it in one bar and then another city. They can kind of all share this common database. So it's sort of like the Homeland Security equivalent of ID scanning at bars.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that before I read this, I didn't even think about it in terms of when you go and you use the ID scanner, that they would actually be doing anything other than kind of checking that it was real.
Right.
That's what's so nefarious about this company, because even in their marketing materials, they're kind of like, you can tell your patrons or not. Doesn't matter to us, but feel free to also share it with law enforcement. No big deal. No warrant required. I feel like we should rename our podcast to What Could Go Wrong.
Or honestly, it's just becoming no warrant required.
No warrant required. That was alarming, to say the least.
So I guess a quick background of the idea of Patron Scan is, it allows you to, if you're going to a bar, you're going to a nightclub, they scan the barcode on the back. It, at least on its base level, it checks to say, yes, this is real. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, someone else is using the same ID in the bar tonight. So, counterfeiting all that. But let's say you get in a fight or you are rude to somebody, you can get thrown out. And then with the Patron Scan system, you can be banned from that bar and every other bar that uses that system.
Yeah. Which
is where it gets to be kind of crazy. Like, I'm not here to make apologies for assholes, but everybody can have a bad night. And if you're banned from 4,000 other locations forever, that feels one step a little bit too far.
And also the fact that so much of this is subjective. Like, your bad night might be someone else's really great night.
Right.
So,
like, we all...
When I get thrown through the plate glass window...
Right.
That's a great night for you, right?
But it's also in the hands of the bouncers, too, and the bar owners.
Right.
Because, again, I'm going to go back to marginalized communities, and you're talking about people who have subjectivity and discretion and say, hey, you know what? I don't necessarily like seeing those two men holding hands. I'm going to ban them forever. And this is a confidential ban list for the most part. So can you imagine then going into another bar and being like, you're actually banned from 40 bars in this area, which they primarily focused on Sacramento. But it's so subjective that it's nuts. This is bonkers to me.
Well, I mean, I think it's bonkers, but from a bar management perspective, I can see why it seems like a good idea, right? I mean, they're just trying to reduce the possibility of injury, lawsuits, people getting, killed, whatever, thrown out, even if it's whatever, I mean, can happen in these situations. So, and this type of platform clearly is, the way that technology is applied to reducing risk. I mean, it's very similar. I'll sort of mention this in my plug as well to a Black Mirror episode, but it's like, it's the fact that there's so many bad decisions that were made in the design that went beyond, hey, we're just trying to reduce risk. Now it's like this platform for banning people for no apparently good reason or whatever reason that you want. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it has so many bad aspects of how it was implemented that that is really kind of amazing to me.
Yeah. According to the Patron Scan Public Safety Report from May of 2018, the average length, and I'm going to quote this from the article, the average length of bans handed out to customers in Sacramento, California was 19 years, which that's a long ass time.
Well, how do they even, where did they get this data? I mean, Patron Scan hasn't been around for, is it arbitrary? You just press in a button and say, how many years am I going to ban this person?
It seems like everything around the banning system is a little arbitrary.
Oh,
because
sure.
In this case, the bad behavior could be violence, public drunkenness, and sexual assault. And then
you're in a bar. Public drunkenness is by definition what you're doing.
If you want to make money, that's
right. Going back to the discretion of this, right? So here's the kind of funny case, and going back to 19 years, right? So the bar owner, the management, they're kind of the judge and jury. But for this one, there was an example of this article, in this article about a high severity theft. And that's a quote, that's what they called it. And this woman, after drunkenly conspiring to swipe a plush Furby from the back of the bar, they were caught and they gave back the Furby, but they were listed as high severity threat or theft. It was a Furby, you guys.
It was a special edition Furby. You don't understand.
Special edition, absolutely.
It actually gained sentience, so it was actually kidnapping. So
right, so that's the joke discretion. But imagine this in the hands of really bad bar owners.
So in this case, also included in that May 2018 safety report, it indicates that over 1,100 banned Sacramento patrons, more than 60% were banned for private reasons. So no explanation of rules or how they were transgressed. There's nothing. So you have to go and do your penance at the bar that you transgressed at to be lifted off of this.
I'm sure that at some point there's going to be a $5 submit your information to get taken off of the ban. Kind of, financing model for this whole thing too. It's crazy.
Oh, for sure. I mean, this is not, I don't know, with a lot of this stuff, I think it was in the article where it's it's not about customer safety. It's not about the consumer at all. It's about, the owners and the police. Really, they're the beneficiaries of a system such as this. And it makes you wonder, and I know we're going to talk about product design later, but it makes you wonder, if it's, people are out there just okay, we can gather data in what way? How can we gather some data? Let's brainstorm.
Yeah, I mean, that's they know that they can get venture capital financing if they just have a data play. I mean, it's pretty standard knowledge, but it's pretty scary to sort of see how irresponsible some of these companies are. And something as innocent as one of those little, it looks like a UV scanner, at every bar, that TSA uses, but hey, it's
capturing more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the last thing that we can kind of touch on very briefly, to tie all of our episodes together, what is a new product without a little healthy competition that comes to a separate product, very, very similar, called idscan.net, where it does have upselling. You always need an upsell, and this time facial recognition, and that can never go wrong.
Never.
So
No.
I'm sure we will hear more about this and all the insane things that happen.
I do want to say there was one real positive at the end of this. I don't know if you caught it, but they looked at owners. I think this was in Australia, and one owner said there was a 30% drop in business after his first year of scanner use. And there's been an on-the-ground kind of coalition of people who, through Reddit and different channels, have said, hey, these are the bars in the area that are using this scanner. Don't visit them. So, there is some pushback on this type of nefarious mass surveillance system. So I wanted to point that out. And so if you want to do something in your area, feel free to share those bars on Reddit.
And before anybody who jumps in with the only people that have to worry are the criminals, it's also your data that's being sold. So moving right on, a little bit of a rosier picture. Smart homes. Sunnier. Oh, okay. All right. Well,
Smarter.
very on the nose. This is actually twin articles from curbed.com. The first written by Patrick Sisson, and then the second being written by also Patrick Sisson, talking about high-end housing developments who are using sustainability as a selling point. I am a millennial, so owning my own house is obviously something that I'll never be able to do because I eat too much avocado toast.
And you don't want to do it, right? I mean, it's just why bother?
You've killed so many things. Why not home ownership?
Right. But this is like the one thing of new developments. I've always been a little against like developments, especially when they have dumb names. It reminds me too much of like, I can't do it. But this is a really interesting idea that the only way that they're able to fund and get people coming in is they are creating a marketing plan and an ideology in this like really nice story around net zero sustainable housing.
So I love the idea of net zero sustainable housing. I mean, we've got, I mentioned it on previous episodes, but we've got solar photovoltaic PV, we've got solar thermal, and I've been researching recently a solar panel system for my shed, like the office shed that I work in, and like, figuring out batteries and charge controllers and hooking them up to Wi-Fi so I know how much charge I've gotten, and like powering lights and maybe even like a little mini air conditioner or fan in here or something like that. And I mean, there's like of cool tech, it is one of the coolest in the sense of we're actually trying to do something to reduce carbon footprint. You're actually trying to basically make energy out of nothing. So it's like a win all around. So I mean, this is, when I read this article, and actually I picked up on one of these articles, one about California and their sort of new regulations in regards to solar, by a marketing email that somebody sent to me, and they said, California has a new regulation requiring every new building or new development to have, solar on it. And I was like, they're just making that up. But I looked it up. I mean, this is real deal.
Yeah. I think it's great. I mean, this is totally one of the things that would draw me into a new place is the sustainability of it, because you would have to just be ignoring the world to not notice that shit's getting real with warming and climate change or extreme weather. But yeah, this is great. And then it reminded me of, again, I think possibly it was when some of our HA team members went to CEDIA, but there was even something you could plug into your breaker box to see which of your utilities was using the most energy. So it's that type of sustainability, but also monitoring. I think we were talking about monitoring it versus managing it. That's really exciting, and I would love that kind of thing, even in a smaller place. Like I'm with you, Adam. I'm like less like you. Like I'm like, I already own a condo, but it's like, will I ever get out of 600 square feet? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's feasible, because my AC also just broke down. So there goes, lots of money out the door. But you know what? I feel all right about that because apparently, speaking of things that are now going to be legal or not, Freon in 2020 is illegal. I don't know if it's a certain type of Freon, but anyway.
Yeah, it must be because there's certain CFCs they've already banned, right?
Right.
Fix the ozone layer.
So if I were to go into a new place, if I saw that there was something like that, I would feel much better about buying. And I think paying a little bit more of a premium so that I'm not destroying the environment.
So the developer in this property, his name is Marshall Gobuti. The development is called Hunters Point, Pearl Homes and Marina. It's a very long name, but...
Sounds like a ceiling fan company.
Yeah, it is. We can call it Hunters Point from this point on. But his quote about this is really responsible and interesting. He says, quote, "This is an evolution, what home building will be. We have a responsibility. We're the generation that messed up the planet, and now you have the same generation trying to correct it without any compromise." So that is really good. But again, the preceding quote that I did cut off because I just wanted, theater or whatever. You're not going to compromise luxury, but you also want to do the right thing. So, all right, if you can drop $500,000, this is a really good way to do it. That doesn't, again, compromise on what this kind of overarching goal is.
Well, I think for me, the importance isn't necessarily, and I think a lot of people will sort of look at the numbers and say, well, that doesn't really matter to me. Mm-hmm. This is a regulation. A, I don't live in California, or B, these are for rich Hollywood stars, whatever. But I think the importance here is to understand what a simple step like this can do for the rest of the market. Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this on previous episode of Grabcast, and I'm really trying to remember what we called it. It's not the Kessler syndrome, because that's the one where the world blows up. But no, it's the one where I think it was named after a professor that basically said that for every doubling in scale, you get an 18% decrease in the price of the item. Mm-hmm. So by California regulating this and basically increasing the demand of solar panels in a state which obviously can benefit hugely from it, they're also going to create a lot more demand, and from the standpoint of reduction in price for kilowatt produced, it's going to affect everybody, and potentially worldwide as well. I mean, just because California does have so much construction, so it's a really great step, I think, to see this, and I'm hoping maybe not necessarily Massachusetts because we don't get as much sun, but other states will follow as well.
Well, using data from Southern California Edison, this other development, Meritage, they found that with these new electrical systems, quote, energy generating energy efficient units can save homeowners between $63,000 and $67,000 over the lifetime of their mortgage. That's not nothing. So right. I think to your point, Mike, as they become more popular, if we even just follow the smart home trend, where you start in kind of a more luxury environment because that's where you're able to play in the space. Mm-hmm. And then you see people because of marketing, because of images, because honestly, the work that we see internally at TSP every day where I'm like, oh, I would love something like that for my apartment. We start to see more of the kind of prosumer and then consumer versions of this as it just kind of keeps on going down and down. But in this case, I think the best thing, and I know, Mike, you'll be very appreciative of it, the best way to keep a real net zero situation, both with building, is creating housing near transit. But also, please have transit. Please have public transit.
Yeah. And this is where California doesn't really do well, but all right.
Well, the U.S., let's be frank.
Well, all right.
Does the new pogo stick thing in San Francisco count as transit?
Yeah,
we're
does
not going to go there, but
no. Yeah, right.
Oh
no, we
Mike, have you not
too much? But
have you not seen this? That there is a new. It's in Europe. I forget where it is. I rolled my eyes into blindness. Oh yeah, it is.
It's Uber for pogo sticks, basically.
Oh, 100%. It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Here is another way to just bust up all of your bones.
Nice. Lovely.
Or other people's.
Yeah.
But yeah, And also they were saying in that article, going back to the idea of living near transportation, but also denser living, which, like, I'm super sustainable, but I'm like, denser living gives me hives a little bit because I'm already in a dense living situation. And so if this is going to be what it's going to be for a smart home and reducing emissions, then I'd like to see some smart tech around soundproofing, making it seem as if your neighbors are not there and you're just floating in this beautiful bubble of quiet.
So you want that Arkansas space, but in the Cambridge efficiency.
For
well, you
sure.
can. I mean, that's the next, active noise cancellation, and then add in a little bit of Arkansas nature. Some of those
I'd be down with
crickets in the
I
evening.
don't even need nature. I just need to not hear my upstairs neighbor walking or my downstairs neighbor's surround system.
Well, I will drop a couple brands in this because this is a privately financed podcast. So one of the brands, I mean, Kelly, you were talking about the guys coming back from CEDIA and talking about energy monitoring and potentially control at the fuse box. So RacePoint Energy is one of the companies that we work with for that technology. And so it's like brand new and developing, but it's one of those things that you combine that with solar, where you have not only what's available on the grid, but coming from your roof, potentially batteries, monitoring and managing all that stuff. There's all kinds of new great technologies there. So look that up if you're interested in that technology.
To that point, now that I'm actually thinking about it, kind of bringing everything together.
Love it.
Was it? I'm trying to remember. I've been getting a lot of targeted advertising on Instagram, probably because of where we work, but it is this now consumer level box. It's red, and that's what really sticks to my head. You plug it in with your fuse box, and you're able to get, it's like an in between it. Is it Sensi?
Sense. It's just called Sense. Sense.com. Yeah.
So it's already coming to because I think what you were mentioning, Kelly, was a Lutron product, and
possibly, yeah.
And those are that's like high end, like digital scale, like LCDs on everything, like giving you stuff in the moment. But yeah, the Sense Home Energy Monitor, you can see your activity through iOS and web apps. Like, it's really, really interesting, and I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic for the next bend.
Well, I got one of those.
Yeah?
It hasn't been installed yet.
Okay.
I actually got it for a rental property because the renters were complaining about how the utility usage was too high for them. And of course, they're paying for it. But, I figured, well, I'll get this in there, and it would help me to understand, is this 10-year-old AC unit, really burning a lot of energy, refrigerators, all that kind of stuff. So I'll report back when it's installed.
Yeah, please do. I would actually I'm very interested, and especially since their marketing department is really good. It's like this stark white background with this big red box. So yeah. That said, I guess we can talk about product management, product design, since I have just been entranced by a red box. This is an article that's was published on Medium. It's actually written by someone I used to work with at Apple who now works for HubSpot. His name is Henry Wu. The article titled, "Product Designers Should Forget About Coding, Learn Product Management Instead," which is, in this case, I read it because I was on LinkedIn. I'm trying, gang. LinkedIn is a graveyard for me, but I'm at least putting in my efforts. But yeah, this was a linked article that he posted. And it was really interesting because I know, Mike, you and I have had conversations about this in the past where I was like, you know what? I want to learn Python. And then it was like, that's probably not the best use of your time right now.
Right.
Is it the best use of anyone's time? Well, I'm sure it is for some people, like my kids. But yeah, to me, and I'm sure Kelly has a lot to share on this subject. You have maybe a little bit of experience working in companies where they probably don't have people that have these sort of skills. But I do want to say, before she dives in, the experience of working with Kelly and somebody that, I've worked with, quote, project managers in the past. And it's never really been something that's, I think, clicked within the organization, because like it's not only a skill and a position and a role, but it's also something where the person that's working in that role needs to bring everyone else along with them in terms of having them understand how it's an important part of getting things done.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys have have heard about my sort of personal productivity stuff, but on an organizational level, I think having Kelly, at TSP has been such a great thing. And this article, I think, really kind of highlights in a 10-minute read. It's a little bit long, but a lot of why that kind of stuff works if you approach it the right way, not just sort of put a body in the role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think too, I mean, there is a difference between product management and project management. And so the companies where I think it's worked really well is when you have these multiple groups. So even a company that didn't work so well, I think the team was really great in terms of you had the designers work, and it was a video game company. So you had the product designers, you had the product manager. So really the person who's thinking about the product in terms of not just how it looks, but how it's going to work in the marketplace. What's the business need? What's the drive there? But then you had me, the project manager, just making sure everyone's talking and it's working together. But then we also had UX people, which I think is really important. And then we had QA, and we were all kind of working on the same page. But when you don't have all those people, I think this is a good article in terms of thinking about, you don't really, coding is not where you're going to make a huge impact in terms of cross-pollinating your skill set, right? Because it wouldn't make sense for me to do that, but it was always really helpful for me to understand the designer point of view, the UX point of view, and then the product point of view. Because sometimes, I mean, I could imagine being a designer so many times, like say, I think I mentioned before, like they just wanted to blow things up because this was a video game. And I'm like, yeah, just because it's a video game, though, doesn't mean that we're going to blow things up. This is a video game that's based on shopping. So grenades may not be necessarily.
It's not the best power up in that case.
Like if you want your avatars or your characters to buy grenades, maybe. But it really took that product manager role to kind of say, hey, no, and try to get the people to understand. And I think as a designer, it would behoove you to kind of understand that product side so that also you're putting out products that you can be proud of and you can understand more the business side of things, especially when you don't have all those collaborative groups. If you're a smaller company, it really helps. And then we've talked a lot about sunsetting products in the past, and I think it's really thinking about your full life cycle of your product as well. And I've seen that happen even in, travel trip packages. So like your escorted tours, like what are we going to do with this? How long does this last? What are we going to do in terms of the product design? What's the content? But then also, what are we going to do in terms of the business side? What makes the most sense? Mm-hmm. What makes this sustainable for the company profit-wise, but also for, specifically for those regions of the world where we're visiting them. Yes, I did have a lot to say about that.
Much of this article is very specific towards product design, talking about UX and that kind of needing to get 100% solution. I think in this article they refer to it as pixel perfect. But even from a tech point of view, I think if you just did a find replace designer with technician, you would probably get a pretty consistent message right there. Especially in the article, there was a passage saying your job as a designer, in this case I'm going to alter him, your job as a technician is to discover and balance constraints in order to solve problems. That's just our job. But sometimes what we get really into is finding the perfect solution, which is sometimes the perfect technical solution. I know internally we kind of discuss the XY problem, the XY paradox, where you're solving the wrong stuff. You're not hitting what is actually necessary. And in understanding more project management, and especially as I've been working with Kelly, more and more in kind of running our team for our various projects, it is really interesting to think about, okay, so the technical solution is X, but the actual thing that we should be doing is not even starting this project. We should say, you know what, let's not do this anymore because it's not what's necessary. So being able to have that kind of running in the back of your head, understanding what the business constraints are, not only for ourselves and our team, but also our client, I think allows us to execute better systems than saying, you know what, here is the next bleeding edge technology that we can kind of give to you.
Yeah, and I think this is good too in terms of, I think he gives some really great examples for people to understand, but this idea of, as you were saying, Adam, you don't have to be perfect from the get-go, and I think this works nicely with the agile software development, product development, project management, and putting a little bit out at a time so that you're not doing that kind of waterfall level, do something, work on it for an entire year, but putting things out so that you can see whether or not it's going to work or not. And I think the example he used is like if someone were doing a food customization app, like a pizza customization, it's like you don't have to do all the foods in the grocery store. Just put out the pizza one first, see how it works, see what the issues are, because the customers are always going to find the thing that you didn't think of. And it would really be terrible to not have that information and then build this whole system. And I mean, I think there are so many examples in the business world of people taking a year to build a product or more, and then it doesn't do what the customers want it to do, or there's really no demand for it, as we see a lot, especially with these VC-funded ventures.
Yeah, I mean, I think sort of going back to what I started with and sort of a missing piece of what I was explaining, I sort of realized I didn't really explain myself properly. I mean, because this article is really about products and be it software development and product, managers, the way that I read this article was through the lens of a technology services company, right? So instead of developing a software product, the delivery of what we're delivering is really kind of the service. And a lot of the equivalents of what they say are, the product manager's job was kind of where I felt that the project managers within kind of what we do, how that really ends up multiplying the sort of the everyday, sort of activities of the engineers and technicians into something that becomes sort of a business level, type of thing. So it's quite interesting to look at this article through a couple different lenses, not just sort of software development. And I thought it was very insightful in that way. One other observation, Kelly, I just read yesterday that Waitrose or John Lewis and Partners, whatever they're called here in the UK, they're opening up one of their stores is basically being completely redesigned as an eco delivery food, system. And they've essentially got like a freezer of frozen vegetables that you can sort of choose, with a scoop. And they've got, stuff that you see in a lot of places, a lot of non-mainstream grocery stores where you're buying stuff, you're bagging, coffee beans, or you're bagging, grains or cereals just out of these containers. And it was pretty interesting to see that in a very mainstream grocery store in the UK, because it's obvious to me that that's the approach that these guys are taking is, let's put everything out there and let's see what the customer wants to use. You look at some of it and you're like, I don't know that I'm going to bring a Tupperware and load the frozen berries from a scoop into that. But they're doing it in this kind of like iterative process. Let's get it out there. Let's not overthink it. They'll probably remove that freezer and replace it with something else that the customers want, or maybe more of something else. So it's quite interesting to see this in a world where it's more about sort of service or product delivery and less about kind of developing a product itself. But everybody's sort of taking a lot of these principles and making it part of their innovation, in their business.
Yeah, I could see that being just more sustainable for a business long term anyway, instead of that push to get the glut out into the market.
Right. And
just not have any input, before you're releasing.
Yeah, it's kind of chasing the bubble. You have one thing that is like, hey, let's burn out and just say, all right, we'll make a decent amount right now. And then when the bubble bursts, like, no worries, we'll just scrap up and try again, versus something that is more sustainable. So,
yeah. And you have to sort of look at like the Amazon stores, which have gotten a lot of criticism, right? That the sort of like, I can walk in, I can get the stuff, and it just automatically gets charged to the Amazon account. And people are really tearing that apart. It's like, oh, this is what can go wrong, and this is how it doesn't make any sense. But you have to look at those things through the lens of this kind of iterative process where they're just trying something new. They own Whole Foods, right? I mean, they don't need need to come up with a way of selling groceries because they've got one, they bought it. But they're using, these sort of new technologies, iterating, seeing what works, what doesn't, shut it down, open up a new one. And probably when we see it, it'll be integrated into Whole Foods in a way that will be a lot less, a lot less obvious. Like, oh, well, this could go wrong or whatever. Suddenly you'll see a lot of innovation. I mean, like we've talked about with Amazon, as much as you hate them, you got to love them for what they do in business and how they operate.
So on that point, the kind of things that Henry leaves off on, and again, I am sorry, Henry, I'm going to be swapping out designer for technician in this case, is ruthless prioritization is something that I know we have been driving our techs to understand and get better at and become more of a knee-jerk reaction. But driving cross-functional communication and planning. But then one specific quote is, again, as a technician designer, being part of the planning and visioning process helps you be more strategic about how you deploy research and design resources. Like, that's everything. And as we start to kind of talk about project management and the life cycle of the project, it will become easier for that. We are already seeing more successful projects. We're seeing that kind of satisfaction. And honestly, the amount of time and money we spend on a project is becoming more trimmed because we're not wasting time. We're not redoing something because we didn't listen to the actual problem. We just filled in what we assumed. So all really, really interesting stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
And on that point, that is the time we have this week on the Grebcast. If you want to check out our other musings, similar to what Henry posted, you could always check us out on our website, tsp.me, and at tsp.space. And if you want to see some interesting photos, always look us up. Instagram, TSP LLC. For plugs this week, what do you got, Kelly?
So the Women's World Cup starts on Friday. I'm very excited about it. But also, it's exciting because 4 members of the U.S. women's soccer team have started their own company called ReSocial, and they're capitalizing on their own popularity in sports after there's been a lot of gender discrimination stuff going on in the world of soccer and pay parity. And so they've started their own company called ReSocial, and I believe it launches today, but there's a really great New York Times article about it today by Vanessa Friedman. So definitely check that out. And also go Team USA. I will never say that. Like, I can barely.
You got through it. I'm so proud of you.
I know.
I can see your jaw tensing through the middle of it, but
I love our team. I love our team.
How about you, Mike?
Well, I will plug an episode. It's from a couple seasons ago of Black Mirror called Crocodile, and it's a talking about privacy. It's a really interesting one where somebody's invented a device that allows you to sort of plug into people's memories and actually record them. And it's sort of this, the day when it goes from being a police thing into the insurance world. So people start using it in the private sector in order to find out, what happened in an accident and what could possibly go wrong.
Certainly nothing with Black Mirror.
Absolutely.
Utopias everywhere.
Everywhere.
Awesome. So until we talk to you again, stay cool.
Bye.
See ya.